I know.
Are we good? Nice.
We are now live.
Now live?
Okay. Yeah.
All right, good. So good morning, everybody. Calling a workshop for August 1st to order. Thank you guys for attending today, and whoever else is online attending. Good morning to everybody. I'm going to turn it over to the SHPO, Julie, to give us some opening remarks, and then we're going to get on with the discussion on Chris.
Great, thank you. So good morning, everyone. We're really happy to see all center and our inventory. So I think that, so the history of where we've been on this, I know that staff and the IC coordinators have been working really hard on the first phase of our single system, and I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to everybody for where we are now. Thanks to Jody and Eric for shepherding this complex project that we're learning as we go. Many things I think that will be helpful to getting us into a space that we've been desperately seeking for, I will say, over 15 years generously, but I'm really excited about the progress that we've made, and I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the work that you've all done already and stress the importance of keeping this momentum. I want to say that we are in the process of putting together, and there'll be more on this later, but we're in the process of putting together a scope of work for a follow-on contract. And that's our #1 priority in the office, is to make sure that that contract is let, so we don't lose of the progress that's happened to date. But I just wanted to take a moment just to say thank you for how we got to today, and hopefully we'll just keep going and make a lot of progress and get this finished. So thanks, everyone.
Good, thank you. You get you over to Jody.
Yes.
Good morning. I'm Jody Brown, the Deputy SHPO. I'm going to provide an update today. I think some of the materials that you have received, a lot of this information is already in there, but I'm going to try and summarize it for the meeting itself. So first of all, I just wanted to remind everybody what the 4 main objectives for our new automated system, which is being called the California SHPO Online system. We're consolidating the data from 9 different systems into a single system. We're increasing the efficiency and ease with which users can access the data while maintaining appropriate security and confidentiality. We're increasing the efficiency with which the data is maintained, including processing of submitted information and updating and editing. And the 4th main objective is integrating the Office of Historic Preservation and the non-CRIS workflow into the database to provide transaction and tracking capabilities to both internal and external users. In the materials that you have, we had an update from the end of June, and now I have an update through today on the status of the existing development of the system. So work continues on the iterative data extraction, transfer, and load, or ETL, process, and the application development efforts. Farallon, the Arches contractor, has populated a test system with cultural resource data from the information centers and the Office of Historic Preservation. The information centers and OHP will provide feedback to Farallon on the data model and application functionality. Data cleanup work is underway at OHP, which will improve the efficiency and results of the ETL, or extraction, transfer, and load effort. Hands-on training sessions with the IC coordinators and OHP are in progress and will continue through the week of August 5th. And testing will be underway as the training sessions conclude. The testing environment is being finalized. The project team will identify which user requirements to focus on in the remaining months of the current contract, which ends October 2024. This will inform ongoing planning for subsequent phases of work after the current contract is done. I wanted to get into a little bit explanation about project phasing. Based on what has been learned in the Fairlawn contract during the first phase, the phase we're in now, of the overall project, progress is envisioned to be completed in a total of 3 phases. The continuing parallel effort of conversion of data and documents into digital format is largely independent of the application development work, so additional data can be added to the new system when the data are deemed ready for inclusion to the system. The progress and timing of each phase, accelerating certain components such as remote user access for record searches and full digitization, as well as the integration of current paper records, is dependent on funding and staffing resources. So, summarizing the proposed phases. Phase 1, which is the phase we're in now, and will be completed the end of October 2024. The goal of this phase is to combine cultural resources and report databases from OHP and all 8 information centers in the system or database to be hosted by the Department of Parks and Recreation. This will be in the ARCHES format. It will allow for the management of the combined data into one system and will allow for identification and management of the components of the overall database and allow the data to be used for record searches in one system. Augmentation of the ARCHES-based system as needed using integration with the Esri GIS tools and training of internal users, the information centers and OHP, on the use of the new system will also be part of this phase. In relation to this, and Julie has intimated this already, a scope of work and a contract award to maintain the system and to continue to develop the system will be created during this phase. Phase 2 will require this contract that I just mentioned to maintain that which has been advanced in phase 1 and to continue the development and integration of the constituents and workflows. This phase intends to also integrate all remaining internal Office of Historic Preservation workflows, replacing and augmenting the existing OHP Tracking and Inventory System, or OTIS. All unit activity data from OTIS will be migrated to the CalSHPO Online. The ARCHES spatial data editing and custom map creation capabilities will be enhanced and will replace spatial data editing and map creation use of Esri desktop GIS tools with processes using only ARCHES tools. During this phase, outreach to external stakeholders is anticipated to elicit input on the detailed system requirements for phase 3. This phase will also include the development of the scope of work and awarding of a contract to implement phase 3. Phase 3 development will ultimately provide external remote access to system to support self-serve record searches from off-site locations, online submittals and responses to all manner of documentation and data needed for cultural resource database updates, public access and searching of non-confidential cultural resource information. The development of a mobile application will be completed for creating and submitting cultural resource data to and retrieving cultural resource data from CalSHPO Online by qualified and approved external users that ensures security of confidentiality and also the security of sensitive resources. Training will be developed and be provided and available for external users. So that's kind of overview of the phases. Any questions before I continue?
Okay, just one question. So I know you said the timing on phase 2 and 3 depends on funding and staffing, but what are the ranges or what are the targets or the goals?
For the timing,
Yeah,
we hope to, for each phase would be 12 to 18 months, dependent on the funding as well as the resources that we have. That's what we're thinking right now.
12 to 18 months.
Oh, 12 to 18 months. So when,
Not total, but for each phase.
for each phase, yeah.
But is that from the time you secure funding? Where you're talking, because, there's a process that you're going through now, like you said, they're planning and support work. So that's once you get funding.
If everything works out perfectly and we can get the funding right away and the contract in line, it would be the 12 to 18 months per.
Yeah.
But dependent on the funding, it may take a little bit longer.
But that's not necessarily going to start November 1st.
No, not necessarily. We hope so.
You can't let a contract without the funding.
Right.
Maybe that's helpful.
Yeah. Oh, no.
And what I've asked staff for were two different scenarios. One is, what's it gonna take to do phase 2 and 3 at the same time? Money and step time? And what's it gonna, and then what's for the phasing consecutively? So I'd like, so that we can understand what that looks like. I'm not willing to sort of accept that we can't do it at once. It might be impossible. I mean, it might be a big lift, but I'd rather understand it and try to figure that out than not. So just wanted to say that.
And the intent is to use the same company for phase 2 and 3
We don't know. It'll be put out to bid.
each time.
With the same format.
Yeah.
So this platform with certain, and so there's, not everybody knows how to use it,
Yeah.
but we can't single source, we get sole source code.
Okay.
But
Okay.
it's a pretty limited
Yeah.
pool, candidate pool.
Okay.
So I had a question too. On phase 1, where you talked about the training of the internal users, ICs and OHP. So when you say ICs, is that the staff managing the ICs?
Yes.
Okay, so not the public yet.
Not the public.
Yeah, I thought so.
And remember for the first couple of phases, we're building a system and we're maintaining the system. So there's sort of, the people running it and doing the record searches are sort of putting their feet in both camps and doing a lot to keep something going as we're building it. So the public won't have access right away while it's being built.
Thank you.
I do have some information about we're asked to comment on the closure of the Eastern Information Center. So I do have some information about that. The Eastern Information Center, or EIC, of the California Historical Resources Information System, the CRIS, located at UC Riverside, ceased operations on Friday, June 28, 2024. The EIC held cultural resource records for Inyo, Mono, and Riverside counties. UC Riverside and the State Office of Historic Preservation are working collaboratively to ensure that the transfer of records to existing information centers is done as efficiently and quickly as possible. With the closure of the EIC, the following plan for the distribution of data, files, and equipment will be implemented. Regarding the EIC documents and records for Riverside, Inyo, and Mono counties, OHB has confirmed that 3 other information centers will each take custody of one county's information, data, and records. The distribution will be Riverside County to the South Coastal Info Center in San Diego, Inyo County to the Southern San Joaquin Valley Info Center in Bakersfield, and Mono County to the Central California Info Center in Turlock. Electronic data has been digitally transferred to each of the ICs listed above, as well as to the Office of Historic Preservation. Hard copy records, documents, and maps are being boxed up and expected to be conveyed to the receiving ICs during the month of August. Once more information is available, including a tentative schedule, information will be posted to the OHP CRIS webpage. OHP realizes the inconvenience that the closure may present to customers and is working diligently to restore access to the cultural resource records as soon as possible. And we understand we appreciate your understanding and patience.
I have a question. Or I'm allowed to ask, was that UC Riverside that closed it? I mean,
The hosting institution, which is UC Riverside, decided they did not want to host anymore.
okay. And I thought that San Bernardino County had been moved.
It had
And
Yeah.
so oh, it's at Fullerton now?
15.
Okay. I thought it went to UC Riverside. Okay.
Any other questions about that right now?
Did the hosting institution give you notice? Just one day up here?
No, they did.
Yeah, they gave notice.
Jody, you're thinking that sometime middle to late August, these counties that have been transferred over would be in an operational format to get record searches at their new institutions?
That I can't guarantee, but what has been digitized has been sent.
Right.
And they have that. There are hard copies of the maps as well as other records that we're anticipating, hopefully by the end of August, all of them will be at the receiving ICs. Now, the receiving IC coordinators will need to go through the documents, the digitized documents, ensure that they understand what's in there and that all the information that they need. There's some, from what I understand, the geospatial data for the records have not been digitized, the ESC. So they're on maps, on plot maps.
So is it the new IC's instruction that once they receive, or at least they're to start that digitization process? Because we know PDIC was a little behind.
Yeah.
San Diego's 100% digital. So are they now under instruction to take Riverside and start converting it, I guess?
I think they are, I'm not sure we actually gave them instructions about it, but they understand that it does need to be put into the system as soon as they can.
Right.
I highly doubt that will be able to be accomplished by the end of August.
Oh, yeah, I don't think so either. I just want to understand, because we know that Eastern Information Center was having some difficulty keeping up with the digitization and having to do the record searches all at the same time. Get that. So it's almost kind of serendipitous that they now divide their counties out to ICs that might have more resources to speed that process up. So just wondering if there's a plan for those other 3 ICs to then pick up the baton and run with it.
Well, I know that they anticipate they're going to have to do that. I don't know the schedule specifically. I don't know if anybody else has any information that could lend to this right now.
I would recommend that we have that conversation with them after they've been able to get the information integrated and get up to speed on providing record searches for what they've received.
Right.
And then as a second phase, have a conversation about digitization with all the ICs.
They'll have a better idea about the status
Yeah,
of
I
the data
just-
when they get everything.
We can't, yeah, I think we need to prioritize getting those record searches up and running again.
Right.
And then we can have a conversation with all the ICs about digitization.
Okay.
Does that work?
It does.
We'll make a note though.
Yeah, just curious.
And we have recordings that'll keep us all honest.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one. So the ultimate goal is for the public to be able to do their own record searches.
Yes, with certain parameters, yes.
I mean, that's gonna ultimately be kind of a different face for the ICs, to have a lot of people doing. I'm sure you may still have people come in who want, maybe some help. But, okay, interesting. That's good. That's a good thing.
Maybe I missed it, I'm scanning it. You shared a lot of information, so I'm just trying to see, and so apologies if this is redundant, but Is there anywhere in the scope for phase 2 and phase 3 to create training for the public when it is ready to have them do their record searches? Is that
Right.
training will be developed?
Phase 3.
External users, got it, thank you. Phase 3, perfect.
Okay, that's all right. We covered out loud.
Yeah, got it.
Okay. All right, I just have one last item because there was a question about the digitization efforts for the ICs and for OHP. A report about digitization at the information centers in OHP was provided at the February 2nd, 2024 commission meeting. So it's been 6 months. Over the last 6 months, the information centers have focused on providing database information and input to support the development of the Cal SHPO online effort. While digitization and verification of current submittals to the ICs continues, a wholesale effort of digitizing older materials has taken somewhat of a backseat during this phase 1 development of the Cal SHPO online. There's no substantive update for the digitization efforts at this time. I can have something a little bit more specific for the next quarterly meeting. But I do want to say that at OHP, the main inventory tasks have been digitizing reports, records, correspondence, creating new resource records as needed, and adding OHP's program evaluations to the resources. So that is continuing at OHP. The information management unit is working with Farallon and the information centers on the online database and are making records of how much still needs to be processed before adding them to the online system. I think that's all I have right now. Basically, I don't have specific information, but we can gather for the next commission meeting. Everybody's been kind of full out on trying to help with the development of this online system, and that's where a lot of the focus has gone.
Yeah, and I just wanted to also say that one of the things that we're doing in this effort is to also think about, look at what does completion look like what does progress look like, how do we measure it? How do we measure it? Sorry, I don't have a voice today. And in doing so, if you look at page 3 on the handout that was given, I just want to say that we've sort of pieced out what the CRIS is, what the information resource set is, like what are those resources, and what's our obligation by statute. So on page 3, I think I'm in the right place.
Yeah.
Where we talk about, is this the right spot where we talk about what's the inventory? There's always been this question. Jody, am I in the right space that's telling us what those differences are?
Yeah. Yeah.
The first
Oh, wait,
page.
you're, first page.
The first.
Of the first part. Page 3, where you're talking about the components of the Cal SHPO online.
Yeah.
Yes, that is it.
So look at the top of it, and so we're really trying to think about how we measure what we're doing and what success looks like. And I think one of the ways that we've done that or are doing that is to figure out what's our statutory obligation, and then what's everything else that we're holding. And not to say that the things that are at the ICs aren't important, but they're not part of that statutory obligation in a real sense. It's these things have been kept over time because they're valuable and useful for information and to understand what's happening around the state, but they're not exactly tied in a real direct way to the statutes that we're implementing. So rather than only keeping a very narrow inventory, you'll hear other states say we're 100% digitized and we're ready to go. Theirs is that very narrow federal sliver, which we've decided is not really would not serve the California public well to keep it that narrow. So one of the ways that we're looking at is, are we doing what our obligation is statutorily first? Is that done? And then how are we getting the rest of the things in there that we all know and really what people think are the CRIS? How is that happening? So I just wanted to clarify that distinction so that we can we'll be using that as we go along to just track our progress. So I just wanted to point that out. Does that make sense?
Will that progress be like percentages that I've done, or?
Yes. I think we're trying to figure out how to track it to those buckets and then overall. Because if someone comes to us and says, well, what's your statutory authority? Oh, it's this and that's done. And then all of this stuff we know is really useful and we want to make sure we keep it. And here it is. I think there's always been a question, if I'm not wrong, Eric, how long about what is the database? What are the records? What is the CRIS? And so this was our best guess at how to sort of answer that question once and for all.
So just so I make sure I understand, so what you're saying is, at least for now, you're focusing on exactly what's here, properties listed in the National Register, California Historical Landmarks Board, state points of historical interest, in terms of the data that's being input.
We're focusing on all of it, but we're making sure that we have a way to measure them separately in the system so that we understand that we've met the statutory obligation, and then focus, then if we have to make decisions about what to focus on, that we do that first.
So all of it means the next sentence over time.
Yeah. Did I get that right? Yeah, okay.
Great, thanks so much.
Thanks, Jody.
That's a lot, so.
It is.
Does that include surveys that you fund, CLG grant surveys?
If
Part of it.
they give them to us.
They're supposed to. Okay.
Any other questions?
Just
Adam,
one more.
remind
I have one more.
Go ahead.
Go with, is all of the information centers, when they were digitizing, or still are digitizing, were they all digitizing in the same formats? I mean, things have changed over time, you know, in terms of formatting it. So I'm just wondering if, I mean, are we talking just putting things into a PDF? Or, you know, obviously if you have spatial data, that could be a GIS layer. I was just curious if everybody.
Eric, do you want to answer that question?
Sure, I can provide more details. Yeah, I mean, over the history of the digitization effort, we started off with different formats at different places. The ICs all are using different instances of the same application. So when they digitize into that application, it's essentially the same format and structure. And then OHP's system is different from that. So right now, when we're combining the data, there is that, you know, we put apples to oranges there.
Yeah.
I'm kind of oversimplifying everything, but that's the gist of it, yeah.
So there is some reconciling data.
Between OHP and ICs, there's a fair amount of reconciling to be done. So that will occur, some of it is occurring during the project, some of it will occur, as it has been over time, you know, through the natural processing of the inventory. When a record search gets done or a new record comes in, you look at the area where it is, and if you're seeing some variation or duplication or whatever, it can be found that way. For instance, yeah. There's not a lot of spatial data coming from the OHP inventory. That the ICs maintain spatial data. OHP has not historically the snapshots of places and things like that. But you have your documents, you have your tabular data, you know, rows and columns essentially of data, and then you have your geometry or spatial data. Those three pieces. So OHP's data is mostly the documents and data, and the ICs pretty much have all three.
So in some cases, then spatial data needs to be created.
Needs to be cases.
In a lot of cases.
Yeah, OHP, yeah, in OHP's case, absolutely, almost everything.
You'll see the numbers dive dramatically.
Okay.
If you think about the built environment resource directory that's available online, that's just a singular component of a broader CRD. It may represent a lot more of the SHRI, but its overlap with the CRD needs to be examined as we reconcile, bring them into this single system. But in our case at Sonoma, I can speak, the vast majority of unmapped components relate to built environment resource directory. The information center maps have been largely digitized. Everything's in the database and everything has a PDF nowadays. But that'll be the big lift in the future coming, mapping those surveys that you were bringing up. Oakland's my nemesis. I love them to death, but they've been funded with numerous surveys. So the amount of digitization in Oakland will be a lot of fun. And, over time, get DPR 523 records for those buildings and catch them and do it as Eric was mentioning.
The proportion in the OHP inventory, there's built environment and archaeology, essentially. And the built environment is a much higher percentage of resources that have been given trinomials, meaning that an information center at one point processed them. Whereas the built environment is a lower percentage of primary members because they wouldn't have got trinomials by and large. So, along with what Brian was saying, the archaeology, a lot of it is a matter of confirming that the data associated with this trinomial at OHP are talking about the same resource with this trinomial with the ICs, whereas in the built environment, a bit more start from scratch, if you will, in terms of reconciling the data. Although it's ongoing, so it's not starting from scratch today. I just mean the nature of the data and how they're created. A lot of the archaeological data is actually submitted by the ICs to OHP back in the floppy disk days. So the data were loaded into OHP's database from the ICs, so it's coming back around, for better or for worse. Anyway.
I have a couple of questions. To avoid the risk of building a bigger backlog, is it safe to assume that the submission requirements now are for people to turn in their digital data and their PDFs in a format that will be supported by the new system, as opposed to getting things that are still going to need massaging?
I think that's a mixed bag. Again, I feel like the ICs will probably be ahead of the curve on that when we come to November. And I can't speak for OHP myself on that front, as far as the requirements for submittals. Sorry, I know that's out there. There are some standards. Sorry, I'm looking. I don't know if there's something we haven't discussed recently. My presence.
Maybe we could log that question in and come back to it later, if I may.
Yeah, during the testing, we've been informed that it's business as usual during this phase, probably leading us into phase 2. A lot of the standard, I have apologies, in your day-to-day work, maybe you use ESRI's GIS software, maybe you use your own industry standard enterprise system, but that we use Esri software, and so we're used to using geodatabases and shapefiles. GeoJSON is the spatial language of ArcGIS. So we'll be doing conversions of your submitted geodatabases on our end so we can import them into ArcGIS. I think tools will get developed, and this is the stuff that will all get worked out as we, I guess, get the scope based, they have all that information. But we've been assured that we can keep business going as usual with, as we kind of talked about, these, I think we talked about an Esri plugin in phase 1. There's some certain functionality that we need to process the inventory that isn't in the off the shelf, and so we're going to have a bridge, and I think Julie mentioned, putting two worlds for a bit, yeah. It's going to be, we're going to be doing a fair bit of back and forth to be sure to get that lift. So thanks for waiting in line.
Of course. I think we all understand as worlds collide, you're going to not be able to avoid just the cleanup process, and some of the feedback that the user community has brought to our attention was, there's always been this risk of redundant records, for example. So I'm assuming this will fall into phase 2 or phase 3, but I'm wondering if we can factor in some sort of stopgap or way of addressing the potential of somebody re-recording something that's already been in the system or something like that as the cleanup process begins with the current records. Whoever it is that receives the EIC, for example, is going to see that there are 2, 3, 4, 6, 10 different identifiers for the same resource that's been recorded over time with different shapes and sizes. So I don't know how this is supposed to look in a new system, but I'm just wondering, once we start receiving feedback from the user community, it would be great to collect anecdotal stuff like that, like how do we avoid redundancy? And find a way to build that into the system up front, so we're not kind of catching up with that.
I don't think we need to wait to get feedback from the user community. You just gave us that, and so that, I understand, maybe I'm wrong, Jody and Eric, but I understand that we have reconciliation as part of some phase somewhere. So, I mean, cleaning up the database is certainly a goal, right? I think, yeah.
And we've been having discussions about, like, you know, what do we do when we have 3, 4 occurrences of recordation of the same resource? And then it's been, at least over the last month, I've been having that discussion with Steve and Eric and figuring out how that's going to be handled. So it is we're recognizing that it's an issue, but yeah, I think any input or suggestions from, you know, the public, from the user community, that is perfect. I think that would be great to get. So, and I did want to ask you, Adam, you started out with a question for us to work with. Did it, can you recite it again, or did we kind of go through it and kind of answer it already?
Yeah, I think you answered it.
Okay,
Thank you.
I do have a question, if I may.
of course.
Proceed.
Thank you. It's a question about accessibility. In the digitization process, is there work to be in compliance with ADA?
I think we have to as a state database.
I know, but
Yes, so yes.
do we see that going on in the digitization process that's happening already? Is there work, PDF, I mean, so we're doing it with the university, right? Because we use Canvas as a teaching platform, and you would be, I don't know about surprised, but how many people can't get access to clicking a PDF or something like that? And so we're pumping a bunch of money in to make sure that every faculty member who uses this learning platform has everything on there that is in compliance. I'm assuming, I understand that because you're receiving federal funding, but what I want to know, is that happening on the ground?
So I'll say it's an expectation that it will be accessible because it's a requirement of state databases. If it hasn't been explicitly expressed and a task item identified, we can. But the short answer is yes, it will. And the longer answer is, I don't know exactly 5 things that we're doing yet, but we're not that far along that it's not out of the question to be sure that we had it in. So thanks for the reminder.
At least on the phase 3 public access part, that's in the work, that's in the
Yeah.
plans too. Because like I said, we have to. I was going to comment on the duplication problem, just to note that one problem now is, as we mentioned, we don't have a lot of spatial data from OHP's database, or hardly any. So duplication is a higher risk when you don't know where something that's in the database is. You have to try and figure it out. So one of our goals for the ongoing data entry for the inventory is to capture spatial data from the OHP signals as well through division of labor between the ICs and OHP. So at least on that level, it will, for ongoing data entry, it will lower the chances of duplication between something that's submitted to an IC and something that's submitted directly to OHP. While today, that relies on communication and email and whatever else that we don't really have, they don't really have the time for, that in a standardized way, I guess I should say. So it should improve that aspect of it, that if you submit something to an IC, they'll be, or to OHP, they'll be able to see in the single system what's in the system. And if it's difficult locating what's in the system, so be it. But from that point forward, more and more spatial data will be added from OHP's submittals to OHP.
I've got a question. You know I'm not a user, but so when you do if you're bringing in, not make it terms wrong, but if you're bringing in a spatial file and it's the original file is an older dated file, but yet the new user that's giving you the information has updated content, and you're adding it now, is all the quality control done manually, or is there any type of system AI that's looking at anything and saying, hey, this is it's overriding something that used to be here with this old file, and you're missing this piece? Is it all done manually?
As far as I know.
So
I'm trying to make sure I understood you. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so I guess then the question, if it is, are any of the new RFPs looking at it? any type of AI for quality control. And is it being used anywhere in the private sector?
Well, I mean, I think data reliability and quality control are all under that same umbrella,
Yeah.
and
Was it all man?
depends.
Yes.
It depends.
Coding, yes. Chat GPT, no.
Yeah.
So running scripts to run for verification across it, to find errors that you and I don't want to troll through the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Let's call that automation.
Okay, right.
It's smart mousetrap.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes and no, kind of back to that. Depends.
There's automation without using AI currently, yeah.
Yeah, that's
That's,
right.
yeah, shifting towards that AI, well, that's, a whole other conversation.
We haven't gone there yet. That's the AI approach to quality.
But it works nicely we play with a lot of data verification in Excel spreadsheets. So we're, you know what I mean, like, we're tapping on it, like, we're not sitting here banging, bricks together, trying to figure out how to check it, we're using modern stuff, whether that's a part of the project, that's a great question for them. Are the ICs using modern technologies heavily?
There's an interesting aspect to that too, there's a million ways to say it, I guess. Is the purpose of the inventory as an index to get the information, or is it a research tool to have all the information there in an automated way? And it's a little bit of both. But a lot of it, what you want to make sure is to capture things as they were submitted, when they were submitted way back when. And if somebody retrieves information from the inventory, they can see that themselves and make their professional decisions about whether that information is reliable or wrong or what have you. I mean, I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but I'm just saying, so there's a component of this where things have been submitted for this area here over the decades. Here they are. That's part of what you get when you request a record search. You get the opportunity to see those records. And yes, the ICs and OHP will have to make judgments when processing about errors and discrepancies. But you'll also see the records, possibly marked up, but you'll see the records and information that were submitted from long ago, as well as the new stuff. If if it's confidential, you have to be qualified professional, but otherwise.
Okay, that's a different way back into the question. So if you pull a record search for an area, you're going to receive every search or that anybody's ever done, well, not search, every piece of information submittal that has been done on that, and then additionally, an overlay with everything included.
Yeah, I mean, the documents have everything. The database gets maintained and updated, so there is a blending of information. The recording events, as we call them, are tracked, like who, when, but as far as the definition of the resource and what attributes it has, that is mixed. But you do get all the documents to see that are on file for a resource.
You get what you ask for in the sense that there's an order for you. So if you don't want everything, you don't have to get everything. So if you want it all, you can get it all on the sandwich order. And that's your data requesting that you guys approve.
So site's condition changes over time, and it's really good to see the conditions evolution. And if it was recorded 30 years ago, there was nothing there, and then you've got everything from wildfire development to looting. It just depends, but understanding the history of it, you'll know how that site's condition relates to whatever project you're trying to plan around, for example. So it's helpful to have that, but you have to ask for it, like I said, otherwise you might just get the most recent version of it, which really doesn't tell the whole story.
The PDFs currently are maintained, so if we're just talking about resources, the documents are maintained in what we consider to be a master PDF. So the default would be to hand you the full recording history, unless you ask for only a slice of it. It's the other way. So you're gonna get everything unless you say, I only want the most recent Truro 2022 recording. Like, don't give me the old stuff. I only want the often we get the requester asking, we did a record search 2 years ago. Do you have any, we want all the sites that have been recorded since then. And so it's not just the new ones you gotta check out. You have to look at the recording event table as well, because if it's a known resource and someone has updated it, it's not just which sites have been added since 2022, but which sites have been added and updated. Right. So that tracking of the recording events and how that ties into the document is something that we're still talking about, how that gets expressed in the new system. Is it more granular? are all, and that might be something to talk about down the line. Does the user have the ability to opt in and opt out of specific recording events on their own? Like the thing pulls up, currently you click on open the document and you get the whole master PDF, the 87-year recording history in one document. Maybe now it's you just see a database view of it and you can open up the Trero or the Lunch or the Allison recording, depending on which event you want to go to. So those are changes that, we'll see where we end up and how much interaction here.
Well, and Arches allows to do searches like that, layers. So if you have a spatial, say you have a polygon and you want, like you said, you could get everything. Or if you really only want the stuff from a certain point in time, you can actually put in a temporal period.
Yeah, same, we have
You
that.
would only get the documents, or only from a particular recorder, or an agency, or an organization.
I'm gonna just ask if we have 2 people that are participating remotely, and so for the folks that are online, if you have a question or want to make a statement, please raise your hand. William Berg is monitoring the meeting, and we'll be able to call on you and have you join us. And for those of us in the room, we should remember to say who we are when we're speaking, so that the folks on the line can know who we are. Is it? Any other questions? Thoughts, ideas?
Jen and I were looking at the proposed agenda topics that we had sent over. Do we want to talk about subcommittee outreach, or are we just on our way to that? Or how did you want to handle it?
Yeah, we could talk about that. I think you would send us some questions, and I think if I understand, sorry, it's Julie Blanco, the State Historic Preservation Officer. I understand that you want to figure out how to be helpful to taking input from the public so that we can hear their thoughts and concerns. And I think it's a little, we're struggling with that as well. We want to be able to honor that and respect that and encourage it. But how do we do that in the space of a government contract? It's a little bit wonky. And so I'm wondering if, and then be in a more informal way, maybe you guys just hold some listening sessions and have, like, what is it that you've experienced that you'd like to see changed? What are your needs what are your needs now? And what are your thoughts about going forward? So maybe we just arrange some listening sessions that can take that input, that doesn't have to track exactly with the contracts that we have,
Right.
but can inform them as we're doing them, so we don't lose that input at the right space. Because I think one of the things we're having trouble, Jody and I were thinking about, is like, how's the timing of scheduling it so we don't lose the value of the public input if the contract is in a different phase?
Right. So yes, that's exactly what we were thinking about. So Adam Suro, Janet Hansen and I are part of the CRIS subcommittee, and that's because we've got a little bit of experience working with the CRIS system, and we wanted to find a way just to help. What can we do from a commission perspective? So much like our normal role has very strict parameters, it's been difficult to try to define what a CRIS subcommittee would even do, other than we're formed, now what? We want to help, we want to kind of bridge communication gaps, and so that was our first thought, and thanks, Julie, for breaking that down. I think listening sessions are the direction we want to take it, because we're not tied to any contractual stipulation that a commission would have a subcommittee that would then bring data back to the people who are supporting the contract and ensuring that the contract stipulations are met, or this kind of third party, we want to help. So I don't know that OHP knew what to do with us. We didn't know what to do with ourselves in that respect. And so we've been on the phone with Julie and Jody and Law to try to get an idea, like, where can we squeeze into this process in a way where we're not interrupting it, but can we add value to it? And what would that look like? So one of the things we talked about, because people are already bringing us thoughts and ideas just in the course of at least what I do for a living, and Janet, I know you're probably getting some feedback, and she has some great questions. So we were asking OHP, how do we do outreach? Maybe that's where we want to focus our efforts, and then be able to bring information back, and then how they use it in terms of implementing the pieces of the contract, or even from a higher perspective, can we build some of this feedback into the design of the system in one way or another? That'd be great. So not looking to step on any contractual toes, but looking to get our hands dirty a little bit with this process, since there is a certain amount of responsibility that's been placed on the commission for the CRIS. So I think a listening session, it's a long way of putting it, but I think listening sessions would be great, and we're right in the throes of phase one. So I don't know if we want to talk about when we could start putting that together. I think there were questions about whether it needed to be noticed, which is what I think Katie might do.
Members of the commission.
Do not need to be done.
That's right. But you want to have some kind of notice that people know.
Yes.
So I think there's a difference. Do you have to have a timeline notice and notice the locations and all of that? No. But I think it'd be great to notice the public, somehow, so
Right.
people know to join you.
Not a bad routine notice, but a notice notice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How will people notify you? So here's my suggestion, and Jody and Eric, or please jump in, but I think maybe, why don't you two put together sort of what the topics are, how many listening sessions do you think you want to have, and who you're going to target?
Perfect.
And send it to us, and then we can figure out how to schedule it. We can announce it on our website, we can put it in a email blast or whatever that we have. There are different ways that we can get that out.
Right.
Think about, do you want a tribal only session? Do you want north-south? Like, how do you want to, do you want to do any in person versus, I think virtual would be good for the little corners of the state that can't travel far, or state workers that can't travel. So why don't you guys put a proposal together about listening sessions, members, topics, schedule, and then we can go from there.
Yeah.
Now that you have the phases that we're looking at.
Yeah, and defining the stakeholder groups, I think, is
Yeah.
important, because if the tribes want to talk without others, however it works, right? I get it, so.
I would say if tribes are asking for government to government consultation, make sure to bring in Jody. They might, I don't know, but, yeah. Developer communities, people who pull permits, we want to make sure we get a very wide array of folks who give us all their comments,
How would it work with
happy and sad.
a stakeholder group like the IC coordinators? Or are they already part of the contractual communications?
They're part of our review team, but you can
Okay.
invite them to the listening session.
I didn't know if there are certain stakeholder groups that are off limits from a contractual perspective.
I don't think they are, but I think if you wanted to, we are getting a lot of input from the ICs as well as part of the effort, but don't want to dissuade anybody from.
I think it's also more what they can share as part of our process. That's what I would be more.
Right,
concerned
yeah,
with.
that goes both ways, right?
Yeah, so we'll give that some thought as well.
I think we might, though, also want to think about, or at least know a little bit, and I know this is, you're not quite there yet, but what outreach you're doing, so that we understand what you're doing versus what.
We're doing no public outreach at the moment.
I know, that's what I'm saying. So, but I'm not sure if you think it's timely for us to do something like this, or is it just maybe a little bit too early? I mean, I guess one of my concerns is if we can have a listening session and people want to give us their wish list, and that includes things that are just never going to happen. So, you know, you want to sort of manage people's expectations in terms of, and you know, maybe that the idea would be some good ideas come out of that could be incorporated. But I guess I feel like I would want to know enough to be able to take the information constructively.
You want to be productive for the listeners.
Yeah,
Why don't you put some questions in, and once you send us your sort of framework, we can talk, get together and talk.
yeah.
I agree, we want to be really clear that, so I don't know about Jody and Eric who are running it, so I'm going to say something that, and they can correct me if it doesn't work for them, but I think you can start whenever, like, it doesn't, people have experience using it now, we want to know what they didn't like about it, what they'd like to see, right? So I don't in my mind, I don't know that there's any reason why you can't start. If you're ahead of our schedule, I don't think that hurts. I think the only thing is that we just need to make sure to manage the expectation of the people participating, that it's not gonna be Friday when it's done.
I don't think there's ever a point where you're starting too early.
Okay.
And it'll probably mimic the evolution of the phases in itself. So first listening session might be high level because that's where we're at. And then as we get into the details and mechanics of the system, that's probably when the listening sessions would provide a little bit more opportunity for feedback on those details. At least that's been my experience. So, yeah.
Commissioner Milanovic here. I just have a question. The listening sessions, who will be listening? The two of you?
No, we would leave the listening session.
It's more, be more discussion, right, and then listening.
I mean,
Yes.
I guess my point is that there might be questions that you might not be able to answer, and will you have experts that would be in there to be able to answer the questions? Because I imagine a listening session would be full of questions. And not that this is belittling your intelligence or your understanding, but if you're not working on it, you're not digitizing, you're not there, we might get in the way, in other words. Or we might not be able to answer the questions that are being asked. But if you have, as part of the plan, folks from the ICs or folks that have more information on it, there's no way I could answer all the specific questions that are out there.
Well, I think though, as what Julie was just saying, though, if we sort of, as a first step, kind of target our questions to things not necessarily related specifically to the database, like I said, you know, what doesn't work from a user perspective now, what things don't, you know, or from the public, or the issues that some of the users have and the ICs have, maybe, and we don't know what those are yet. Maybe if we start, like you said, sort of high level, that we don't necessarily need to worry about that right now. But, and I think that their outreach is certainly going to be more specific to things that, you know, Jody would be answering, or Julie, and I don't know, maybe even your consultant at that point.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. I also had a question, you know, this was called the CRIS subcommittee, but should we? And I know this, your working title is the Cal Shippo Online, I don't know, you know, which is more than just CRIS. Should our subcommittee be more broadly titled than just a CRIS subcommittee?
Well, what else do you want to talk about? What else do you want it to do? I think that's the question. What more broadly are you wanting to cover in the committee? It's a committee, not a subcommittee.
It's not a subcommittee.
So-
We can call it a subcommittee.
But what more do you want to be doing, and then we can have that conversation?
I think
For now.
for what we're trying to accomplish and the people who are involved, they know what it means. So I'd be more concerned that they don't know what we're doing than we,
Okay.
but there's too many times I've been doing it more so than others. So I think Chris is fine for now, and then if we come out of the first listening session and we realize we're not just talking about the Chris, maybe we can revisit.
Yeah, I'm not being flippant, I just don't know what it is you're talking, what do you want to?
Thinking out loud.
Okay, so you could change it anytime, so if there's more, or maybe it's a different committee, like at one point, I remember when when I first understood there was a state historical resources commission, there was a cultural landscape committee, there was an archaeological committee, there were lots of them.
Modernism committee.
Modernism, yeah, that's right, I think that's where I first met you. So, yeah, it can be fluid. I also just wanted to say that we are, Janon Saunders, our former deputy SHPO, is a retired Inuit in our office now, and one of her tasks is our statewide plan, which is coming up, public meetings and those kinds of things. So we want to be sure to coordinate with those and not confuse people about the input opportunities, just so that we don't waste people's time. Or you could partner with them, depending on what that schedule looks like and how it works for you. So, as I said, she's putting together a schedule right now about like who we're meeting with, who the partners are that we're going to talk to. I've asked her to beat the bushes about unusual suspects, so that we make sure that we're hearing from a broader range of public. So there might be an opportunity to tag along to that as well.
Will the state plan include Cal Shippo Online? Will there be a section on it?
There
Should be.
It's a 5-year plan, I'm guessing?
aren't sections of topics really, so, but it's not something that's not going to be discussed. But I don't think it's specifically called out at the moment. We'll look at it. But yeah, it'll absolutely be part of the conversation. Like, I think in the past, if we're going by the same, we provided the previous report, but we didn't sort of limit the topics. So, does that make sense? Yeah.
How many people are in the review committee for this? Chris, you mentioned the review committee.
The review committee
Yeah,
for,
State plan.
not the state plan for the, Chris, for the.
Council online.
Yeah,
Jody can answer that question, because I don't know.
How many people are, I'm sorry. how
on
many
this
people-
review committee, because I'm not so curious about how many people are on it, just whether or not this review committee should be attending your listening session, so it's, you know, they can offer live, feedback if they know the answers.
I'm not sure are we calling it a review committee?
Well, we have our core team from the
Yeah.
development team. Yeah, and
Okay,
then we have the IC representatives who, well, perhaps one. There's 4 with a backup, and then from OHP, we have a group of 3 with plus me as the project manager. Joseph and Mike and Jody.
so there's 4 and 4, so 8.
Through the chair, Brian, Northwest Information Center Coordinator at the Vail, Montana.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be good to have at least one or a couple, on the listening discussion sessions.
Yeah, really quick, let me just, before I forget my thought. What this is all kind of falling into, and this is something that Janet and I have spoken about with Julie, is what's the communication plan in general for Cal SHPO Online? What is, all of these fall under the category of communication, whether it's the development team meeting and talking about next steps, whether it's now the second workshop, providing updates to the general public and the commission on the structure of Cal SHPO Online, or it's a committee who wants to establish and receive feedback in listening sessions. It's all about communication. And I think after the first workshop, Julie, you had mentioned, like, we're going to have a concerted effort to inform the public of the status, and we're doing that right now, and I think that's amazing. This is all part of that. So my question is there a communication plan that we can say, this is how we're going to be receiving information and then regurgitating it back out? Here are the different types of ways we communicate. We have a development team that meets. We've got a committee that meets. We've got OHP that has a contractual obligation with the vendor who then meet. And at some point, there's going to be a pattern in the chaos where all of the feedback and results of those meetings are going to turn into an active online system that the community will be very grateful to use once it's established, ready to go. So
we don't have a comms plan.
okay.
Our comms plan was to bring all updates to this meeting and have something online, but we can create one. And if you have suggestions, when you send us what you're sending us, put them in there and we'll go from there.
And it doesn't have to be sophisticated.
Sure.
It's just listing who's talking about what, just so that we know, right? I'm not looking to get in on all of those conversations. I just want to understand where they're being had.
We'd be happy to give them.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good idea, to have it articulated. Yeah, good idea.
Brian Munch, Northwest Information Center. 5-10 years ago, I guess, SHPO Roland Nolly and some others, we had a stakeholders meeting at McClellan Air Base. A lot of those stakeholders kind of derive from our operations manual that you are all familiar with and approval of. That's a great group of constituents in your outreach process. It does define some of our different users, and public's in there too. Wanted to access it all non-confidential risk data should be available to the public or something like that. So I mean, some of those access paths that it mentions, I think will at least bring up a good sense of some of the groups, FedAge, state agencies, tribes, CAL FIRE, architectural historians, archaeologists, should have mentioned applicants. You know, there are going to be a lot of, especially in light of some of the laws that have been passed that speak to different development tracks if something is or isn't on the state historic resource inventory. I mean, that's a great email kind of call question we get all the time. Like, hi, I'm dealing with SB9. Do I have a building within my, parcel for this subdivision that's on the state historic resource inventory? And that currently is a fun question to answer, and it'll get much better down the line. Out of that document. That at least in current stage have access. The new system background to line as we get into, especially phase 3. We kind of discussed how these listening sessions can mimic. And then to your question, comment, Commissioner Hanson, about how the record searches will change. Yeah, I mean, the operations manual again has all the fee structure baked into it. So yeah, we will be back in here having that conversation about fees. Yeah.
I was at that.
See, I was channeling on. So it's gonna be, it's gonna be really important from my view, at least, as at an IC, to make sure that the users of our IC are getting involved in this process.
Sure. Yeah, I remember being at that meeting, and it's interesting the change that I've seen over time, talking about what we needed out of the CRIS then versus now. I think there's a different need, especially in climate change and with the wildfire threat being a 12-month issue, not a 6-month issue, that real-time access to data as we respond to threats that would destroy resources that we have records on is paramount. It's something that would allow us to actually create a preservation plan while also responding to wildfire simultaneously, which is something that in California we should be the standard bearer for. And some of my lofty expectations to come out of a revised statewide system is to be able to do that, especially because I deal with wildfire mitigation on a regular basis. You slip the fees in there, you slide on, and I think that's a great.
Can I interject before you
Yeah,
say that four-letter word? Which is to say that, when I came on board, there was a lot of drama around this topic, and I will just repeat again that our focus is on the system.
Mhm.
And when we get that in place, then we'll have the conversation about what happens with ICs. I don't want anyone to, I don't want us to slip back into that space where we're worried about what that looks like when we have this kind of difficult. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just saying this is a conversation for all of us. So the transfer, what that looks like, the transition of the ICs will be done gracefully, publicly, with the input of everybody. It's not going to be here's a letter, go away. So I commit to that. I think we have to do that in a partnership manner, and that's my intention. As far as the fees will need to be readjusted once we understand what the system looks like and what's going to happen and what's the maintenance. Like, we're going to have to figure out who's maintaining it. And now that we're in one space, so all of that will happen somewhere around phase 3 after with, I don't know. But I just want to be clear that my commitment still stands as long as I'm sitting in this rickety chair, that will be the process that we'll have that conversation together.
Yeah, and I know that conversation was brought up in that meeting that you referenced, but nothing I've said we don't have any say in any of that, so.
I just want to be
Agreed.
sure that everybody knows what my intention is anyway.
Yeah.
Is that there won't be a shoving off the cliff, but it'll be a conversation with partners, and we'll have an idea about what that looks like when we know more. I think we can't answer those questions until we know where we are with the system, right?
But I wonder can we, because we've had that on the agenda annually, correct?
We
I
have,
mean, maybe can we just take that off until it's time to discuss it again, or do you?
You're talking about fees, not
Yeah.
ICs and the number of.
No.
I think you can have a vote to when you want to hear the fees again, and just tell us when you want to hear the fees again.
And that would happen in February?
January meeting, I think.
Yeah.
So at the January meeting, you could vote to defer the fees until 2030 if you want,
Okay.
but
I don't think it's a bad idea to,
I don't recommend too long.
Bring it up.
I think it's a good idea to keep bringing it up.
Yeah, I do too.
Well, I think it falls under the, what's our purview? So a lot of this came into the commission and we were already voting on fees.
Right.
So I think our initial question was, why are fees being voted on by the commission?
Yeah.
And is that something we want to see moving forward? Is that a responsibility?
It is a responsibility of the commission. And so the way, if you're not in a position to update them, which I'm not recommending we set that up, Kurt, because we need to keep the service going, that you, I think we, in the last maybe couple of times, we talked about how you talk about it and defer it, so just so it's sort of keeping it in play, but recognizing exactly what you're saying, that we just don't know what they are yet, and so,
But can we go exactly where it says that that's in our purview?
yeah. I think we provided that, but I'll do it again, sure.
It seems to me that there, it said, it was brought up like years ago.
We have,
But it wasn't specific. There was something in the statute about the inventory, that there was nothing. that says-
we'll, yeah, we
I'd
will.
like to see where that
Got it.
exactly is.
So if phase 3 is talking about, maintenance of the systems and, public access in the future, with phase 3, scope of work should potentially include fee structure.
Maybe.
Maybe, I mean, if that's,
That would be the first time we'd talk about it for sure. But I think we'll know more in phase 2, where that goes, if it, yeah. Jody? You think, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is it, I recall seeing that the commission also either voted or approved the instruction manual.
I see wrong, yes, and you've also
Operations.
delegated authority to me for non-substantial changes.
Right.
So any changes to that will be required as this process goes, we'll bring it to you.
Okay. I'm assuming it'll need to be updated quite a bit with the new system, or you'll have a different way of looking at an operations manual given this. the
Yes,
overall-
yes, all of that will be part of the changes, yes. I wanted to say something.
Yeah, just, Brian Munch again, Northwest Info Center. Did you mention the instructions manual? That 1995 instructions for recording historic resources is what I thought you said in terms of instructions.
Operations, yeah, sorry, the words
Operations
are
manual.
interchangeable in my head, but clearly there's these big differences between.
Well, that's a good one, too for the user community. I mean, again, phase 3 mobile application. Do we want to see the same DPR 523 form represented in that mobile application? That's the manual that laid out the 523 series forms that we've all been using since the mid-90s or when we moved to the state in whatever year. Will those change? I mean, that to me is a great opportunity perhaps for the outreach arm of the commission and the stakeholders in concert with whatever phasing and contracts get awarded, because the user communities have always said to us, at least at the IC level, the forms have antiquated terms. When can we change to prehistoric, for instance? We don't like proto-historic. Can we get that off the form? It's like, I'd love to wipe it off, but it's on there now. That's what we got. There's other terms throughout that system that would be right for us to, I think, address. And it seems like this is a great body to kind of travel that process.
DPR 523 form is a state form, so there's a process for changing state forms. I just want to say there's a process for talking about changing state forms, and then there's a process for that. So, we'll put that in the queue as well. Yeah, I should just say generally, all of those things are expected to be updated. We'll, yeah, of course. So.
were there any questions or comments from the folks online? Yeah. Okay.
So you guys will get us your ideas about, and any of those other things, absolutely, and then we'll get on them. Did staff, Mike, Joseph, Eric, anything you guys want to bring up, talk about?
Thank you.
In addition to the amazing work that the team for the Calship Online is doing, Mike and Joseph have really stepped up to make sure that this EIC transfer happens as expeditiously and efficiently as possible, and including taking their own time to be our moving company. So I just wanted to acknowledge that they're really stepping up to help with that and doing everything we can to make sure that happens as efficiently and quickly as possible. So thanks, guys.
Yes.
Anything? No? Is there anyone online? No?
Big Adam's got it.
I've got one more. In a perfect world, all these agencies who've created their own databases would be integrated into a statewide system so that you've got this kind of comprehensive database that includes everything from OHP and the CRIS, and then people who have taken upon themselves to have their own system in place to manage their own resources, whether that be a state or a federal agency. Do you see any type of partnership in the future with them, kind of bringing their data over, or at least
Like with California State Parks or US Fish and Wildlife?
Caltrans, State Park, Fish and Wildlife?
There's a
Forest
lot of
Service?
questions about a statewide database and confidentiality and all of that, and that's a conversation that's much bigger than our office.
Okay.
So the answer is maybe, not something in our purview.
I bring that up because when cultural resource consultants go out and do field work,
Yeah.
oftentimes they'll have to do a record search at an IC, and they'll have to go to the agency's office because they don't share their records. And I'm wondering, in a perfect world, would that second step ever be taken away because CalSHPO Online has those records?
Not anything more personally, because it's not for us. But there is some statewide effort conversation. Mike, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, this is Mike Hurt. Besides being the CRIS coordinator, I work on the Section 106 regulatory program for our college. And so combining those two functions, one of the things that we're looking at is that there are a lot of federal land managing agencies that have struggled to, fulfill their Section 110 obligations to inventory the resources that are out on BLM lands, the Forest Service lands, NPS lands and whatnot. And originally, when we executed Section 106 statewide programs, all of the agencies, part of the deal was that we were bringing you efficiencies in your Section 106 compliance, so we would appreciate it if you would use part of that saved labor to help fulfill your Section 110 obligations, because it's much easier for us to get through Section 106 if we know where the resources are, rather than having to go through that exercise every single time. So that hasn't panned out real well in about 25 years. So a lot of the federal agencies took the savings and cut staff, and that was the end of that. And so it's created the situation that you just described. When somebody does a record search in an area that, that abuts federally managed lands, they have to do a record search, with the ICs, and then turn around and go to the Forest Service or the BLM. They have different numbering systems, different ways of doing things. So we're hoping to begin to reinitiate those conversations with the federal land managing agencies to get into agreements with them where we actually share data and we make it relatively routine, on an annual or biannual basis, where we're sharing information both ways, so that it helps to make the inventory that we have, more robust for the SHPO and for OHP, and also should bring some ease of compliance to those that are formally having to go out to several different places to do record searches. They can just go to the CalSHPO online and get that information.
So yes, maybe. Because we also have to make sure that we're not picking and choosing who we give that kind of access to and not others outside of the parameters of confidentiality. So what Mike said is something that we talked with Forest Service, BLM about at one point, right? In their programmatic agreement, long before what we're doing now. So the idea is a good one, but even that process still needs to be part of this bigger conversation for confidentiality. I think I've said to you guys all 100 times that when I went to Scotland, they handed me an iPad. It was a relief map of the country. I could fly this iPad over the relief map and get all the different layers I wanted to see about endangered species and where road projects are and where the archaeological sites. It was so cool. California doesn't have that. But we're also not the size of my thumbnail. So in that case, I know that there was an effort at the California Natural Resources Agency that talked about layers, but not putting everything in a single database. But I don't know where that's gone. But yeah, it's a good goal to have. for all the reasons you both mentioned.
No, and Julie's right, the Mike McGurk and Chris Porter, the guardrails that go in place with these agreements with the federal land managing agencies will obviously be critical for confidentiality. And so that is a big part of the discussion, but I think over the course of time, that's where we would like to head, because it really makes our inventory more robust for the whole state.
Mike, have you looked into data sharing agreements with the federal land management agencies as opposed to stipulations in their PAs, or?
As Julie mentioned, we're in discussions about doing that kind of thing. We haven't gotten there yet.
Got it, thanks. I know it's a giant task, but.
It's a giant ask, but, so I don't want to sound discouraging or disinterested, because I think it's a great aspiration. The reality of how long it's taken us to get phase one of this project in a situation where we have, the budget constraints that we have, we're about an equivalent of a 10% budget cut that's coming from this last budget, and staff vacancies getting swept. So contracts are looked at very closely. So there's the reality of the world of funding and capacity. And I want to be sure that we're head down focused on getting the Cal Online done first before we figure out how to share it with everyone else, because it has to be done. So I don't mean to sound discouraging. I absolutely agree with you that it's a great idea. But our first priority is to get the thing done, and then we can, and maybe at phase 3, we could put that as a thing to assess, like how are we gonna.
I totally get the priorities.
Yeah, so we could maybe put it in phase 3 or the parking lot of phase 4, or however we do that so that we don't forget about it. Absolutely.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Good.
Right.
There's some local governments that also use the Archers platform. I have one of those local agencies in our area, is that NWIC area. And I think there's a lot of benefit from those conversations down the line. If we're talking about city surveys being more seamlessly transferred into CalSHPA Online, because you have some of the bigger cities doing these surveys on that same platform. I think there's a lot of opportunity to create those down the line. Regionally, I know other ICs have created successful data sharing relationships. Chico had one for a while in their Forest Service area. Our Caltrans District 4, which is wholly in our area, have a subscription agreement, data sharing agreement with. So I think there's some regional success stories to be built on. And like Shiva mentioned, once it's built, it'll be a lot easier. I can remember Forest Service sitting in one of our annual meetings, like, just show me what it's going to be, and we'll get this going. And if we get to the end of October and have something tangible, it'll be a lot easier to have this conversation.
Thanks.
I'd like to get FEMA to throw in some funds for us to get this done faster in that sort of spirit of cooperation. So there's lots of opportunities.
Good. It's been a good conversation. Anything else before we wrap it up?
Do we need logistics for what's happening next?
Sure.
So everyone, go forage for your food. We'll meet back here at 2. Please make sure to bring some water with you. It's gonna be hot outside. There's places all around here. We're gonna meet here and then walk over to start our tour. Is that right, William?
Yes, and people can leave their things here. This will be locked up all around.
Good.
Thank you to the people for joining us online. We really appreciate your time today. And thank you to the people in the room.
Yes.
Don't mean to ignore the people in the room. Anything else? Any other questions?
Thanks to OHP for spending time with Janet and I as we pepper you with all these questions and try to get this type of thing out there. So
You know that I say there's no such thing as too many questions, right?
Well,
Child of a school teacher.
appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you guys.
You guys, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
2 o'clock.
Remember, if more than 2 commissioners go to lunch together, don't talk about work. Thank you.
We adjourn.
Yes.